One business takes on many challenges. But when they're beyond what one can solve, it'll take more. Each one pitching in to form seamlessly linked solutions. And with a partner to innovate and collaborate, we can create better experiences than we ever could alone, to become more valued than we'd ever be on our own. Because there's nothing greater than working as one to make an impact in people's lives. Redefine our greatness. Globe Business.
The Philippines has taken a seat at the table in the new world. In a market brimming with opportunities, our nation could not be more ripe for hypergrowth. A lot of what the Philippines has to offer is often overlooked and remains untapped. These include innovations and capabilities in fintech, health tech, edutech, and more. The potential of the Philippines is overflowing with life-enhancing ideas that can be pursued on a large scale. As one of the largest English-speaking nations in Southeast Asia, we can be your partner to tap a wealth of opportunities around the world. We are your friends, your neighbors, your co-workers, the people that can lead you into the future of wonderful possibilities. A champion of Filipino innovation, rooted in solving everyday problems with compassion you can feel, care you can rely on, using technology you can trust. A digital solutions company leveraging our assets and expertise in uplifting the life of every Filipino. We are local at heart, but we think global. We have a story to tell, sharing our voice to create a globe of good. Investing in the Filipino because we see a Philippines where families' dreams come true, businesses flourish, and the nation is admired. We are the Globe Group. Filipino now, global tomorrow.
One business takes on many challenges. But when they're beyond what one can solve, it'll take more. Each one pitching in to form seamlessly linked solutions. And with a partner to innovate and collaborate, we can create better experiences than we ever could alone, to become more valued than we'd ever be on our own. Because there's nothing greater than working as one to make an impact in people's lives. Redefine our greatness. Globe Business.
The Philippines has taken a seat at the table in the new world. In a market brimming with opportunities, our nation could not be more ripe for hypergrowth. A lot of what the Philippines has to offer is often overlooked and remains untapped. These include innovations and capabilities in fintech, health tech, edutech, and more. The potential of the Philippines is overflowing with life-enhancing ideas that can be pursued on a large scale. As one of the largest English-speaking nations in Southeast Asia, we can be your partner to tap a wealth of opportunities around the world. We are your friends, your neighbors, your co-workers, the people that can lead you into the future of wonderful possibilities. A champion of Filipino innovation, rooted in solving everyday problems with compassion you can feel, care you can rely on, using technology you can trust. A digital solutions company leveraging our assets and expertise in uplifting the life of every Filipino. We are local at heart, but we think global. We have a story to tell, sharing our voice to create a globe of good. Investing in the Filipino because we see a Philippines where families' dreams come true, businesses flourish, and the nation is admired. We are the Globe Group. Filipino now, global tomorrow.
One business takes on many challenges. But when they're beyond what one can solve, it'll take more. Each one pitching in to form seamlessly linked solutions. And with a partner to innovate and collaborate, we can create better experiences than we ever could alone, to become more valued than we'd ever be on our own. Because there's nothing greater than working as one to make an impact in people's lives. Redefine our greatness. Globe Business.
The Philippines has taken a seat at the table in the new world. In a market brimming with opportunities, our nation could not be more ripe for hypergrowth. A lot of what the Philippines has to offer is often overlooked and remains untapped. These include innovations and capabilities in fintech, health tech, edutech, and more. The potential of the Philippines is overflowing with life-enhancing ideas that can be pursued on a large scale. As one of the largest English-speaking nations in Southeast Asia, we can be your partner to tap a wealth of opportunities around the world. We are your friends, your neighbors, your co-workers, the people that can lead you into the future of wonderful possibilities. A champion of Filipino innovation, rooted in solving everyday problems with compassion you can feel, care you can rely on, using technology you can trust. A digital solutions company leveraging our assets and expertise in uplifting the life of every Filipino. We are local at heart, but we think global. We have a story to tell, sharing our voice to create a globe of good. Investing in the Filipino because we see a Philippines where families' dreams come true, businesses flourish, and the nation is admired. We are the Globe Group. Filipino now, global tomorrow.
one business takes on many challenges. But when they're beyond what one can solve, it'll take more. Each one pitching in to form seamlessly linked solutions. And with a partner to innovate and collaborate, we can create better experiences than we ever could alone, to become more valued than we'd ever be on our own. Because there's nothing greater than working as one to make an impact in people's lives. Redefine our greatness. Globe Business.
The Philippines has taken a seat at the table in the new world. In a market brimming with opportunities, our nation could not be more ripe for hypergrowth. A lot of what the Philippines has to offer is often overlooked and remains untapped. These include innovations and capabilities in fintech, health tech, edutech, and more. The potential of the Philippines is overflowing with life-enhancing ideas that can be pursued on a large scale. As one of the largest English-speaking nations in Southeast Asia, we can be your partner to tap a wealth of opportunities around the world. We are your friends, your neighbors, your co-workers, the people that can lead you into the future of wonderful possibilities. A champion of Filipino innovation, rooted in solving everyday problems with compassion you can feel, care you can rely on, using technology you can trust. A digital solutions company leveraging our assets and expertise in uplifting the life of every Filipino. We are local at heart, but we think global. We have a story to tell, sharing our voice to create a globe of good. Investing in the Filipino because we see a Philippines where families' dreams come true, businesses flourish, and the nation is admired. We are the Globe Group. Filipino now, global tomorrow.
Hey dude, I'm RM, your friendly risk manager at Globe. Welcome to my home. Much like our very own homes, we prioritize the safety of our family and guests. In this case, Erica Globe and our guests. This is why we have security and emergency guidelines for everyone. Let me walk you through it. In the event of a fire emergency, inform the nearest security personnel or concierge, or call the emergency hotlines here. Have you taken note of them? If fire has spread and there is heavy smoke, evacuate to the nearest exit in a quick and orderly manner. There will be emergency response team members to guide you to the assembly area. Once in the assembly area, you may assist others if you are capable to do so. In the event of an earthquake, stay calm and remember to DCH, duck, cover, and hold. Stay away from glass windows, doors, and unstable furniture, as these may fall down on you. Once the shaking stops, check for possible injuries. Be prepared to evacuate if needed, but wait for an official announcement via the PA system, ERT members, or security personnel. If the situation calls for an evacuation, there will be ERT members to guide you. Line up for evacuation and take note of every instruction given to you. If no instructions were relayed, you are empowered to exercise your sound judgment, especially when danger is imminent. Congratulations! Now that you've breezed through my presentation, I know you'll always be ready. Thanks for listening, dude! Again, I'm RM, your friendly risk manager at Globe. Until next time!
Let us all rise. for the Philippine National Anthem.
Ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Kindly take your seats as we begin our lab, and please watch the screen for our reminders. Please maintain silence while the session are ongoing. Ensure that your phones are on silent mode. If you have any questions for our speakers, you will be given the chance to ask them later during the panel discussion. For those on Zoom and on Facebook, please post your questions in the Zoom Q&A chat box or Facebook comment section. Some of these will be answered directly by our speakers or their staff in the chat box, while other questions may be asked during the open forum. Zoom includes a feature that allows the audience to vote by simply clicking on the thumbs up icon next to the question. This webinar will be recorded and will be available on the Liveable Cities Philippines Facebook page. Last and most importantly, at the end of the lab, we will send you a feedback form, and we would appreciate it if you could take a few minutes to answer the quick survey. Upon accomplishment, you will be eligible to receive a certificate of attendance. Again, thank you for joining our 42nd Liveable Cities Lab. Now, ladies and gentlemen, to our guests here at the Globe Tower and those tuning in online, to open the event, may we call up on stage the chairman of Liveable Cities Philippines, Bill Luz. Bill also sits as the Chief Resilience Officer and advisor of the Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation, or PDRF, the country's major private sector coordinator for disaster risk reduction management, and was in charge in the establishment of its Emergency Operations Center. Over to you, Bill.
Thank you, Patrick, and welcome. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to extend a special welcome not only here to our live audience, but to our Zoom and Facebook audience as well. In the fast-paced world of urban growth, cities encounter a myriad of complex issues that call for creative solutions. Public-private partnerships have risen as a crucial instrument in building sustainable, resilient, and thriving urban environments. Our sixth lab of this year is dedicated to the exploration of innovative PPP models and the evolving trends in urban development. We hope our discussion today can further explain the untapped potential of public-private partnerships and their pivotal role in igniting the transformation towards more livable cities in the Philippines. PPPs are collaborative arrangements where public and private entities pool resources, expertise, and responsibilities to address complex urban challenges. Through PPPs, LGUs gain access to the private sector's innovation, technology, financial capabilities, and specialized knowledge, enhancing their ability to develop sustainable and resilient cities. One of the key benefits of PPPs lies in their ability to adapt to the distinct needs and priorities of LGUs. Whether the focus is on developing infrastructure, improving service delivery, providing public markets, or enhancing public transportation, PPPs provide adaptable frameworks that can be adjusted to align with each LGU's capabilities and objectives. This adaptability ensures that a wide range of urban challenges is addressed with solutions that are inclusive and efficient. Now, we last covered this topic in 2021 in a lab, and we extensively discussed the Mandanas ruling, a pivotal decision that significantly injected financial resources to LGUs and granted them greater control over their financial matters. This newfound financial autonomy paved the way for fresh opportunities, allowing LGUs to spearhead their local development initiatives. However, it must be pointed out, it also transferred more responsibilities on the LGUs. So today we're going to focus and revisit this topic of PPPs for local governments. And we're happy to have organized again a distinguished panel of speakers for today. And they are all repeat panelists here at the Liveable Cities Lab, and we're happy to have them as such regular and reliable partners. Today we have Director Eleazar Ricote of the PPP, or the Public-Private Partnership Center of the Philippines, Attorney Al Agra, a law professor, and Ida Chongson of Opal Investments. And joining us in the panel later will be Dennis Javier, the PPP champion here at Globe. So they're going to be presenting their insights, their expertise, and shed light on significant influence of PPPs in shaping the landscape of urban development and cultivating more livable cities. So let me get started and introduce our first speaker today. Eli Ricote is the Deputy Executive Director at the Philippine Public-Private Partnership, or PPP Center. He's a career officer with more than 15 years of technical and managerial experience in infrastructure and development undertakings. He is a recognized infrastructure development professional in the country and in the ASEAN region. He is a scholar of public administration, governance, public policy, project management, local governance, PPPs, and related areas. He has delivered lectures and written or published several papers and research on the same topics. And right now, to round out his, his experience, he's, I think, even taking a master's in national security administration, so he can deal with PPPs in that sector. So please, to discuss PPPs in the Philippines, trends, challenges, and strategies for growth, let us please welcome back Deputy Director Eli Ricote. Eli?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Bill, for the introduction. Always a pleasure to be in front of the Liveable Cities team and our audience online and here physically. Thank you, Bill. Bill has been the champion of the PPP program. He was in the PPP governing board of the PPP Center 2 administrations ago. Okay, anyway, so I'm going to put together some updates. I'd call this updates on the Philippine PPP program, what's happening. And as you all know, the current administration is very pro PPP, and there's a lot happening in the area. And this can probably be a good takeoff to our for our subsequent speakers, my good friend Al Agra and Ma'am Ida. Next slide, please. Ay, ako pala yung mag-click. Next. Not working? Sorry. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you. Oh, by the way, I'm gonna just greet people online, Bill. This was posted in our website, and some of our local governments accessing our support through capacity building, even some universities trying to study PPP and learn about the developments in local governments said they'll listen to this and probably do something moving on as a research, as a specific support to some local governments. Particularly mentioned Professor Gabriel Lopez's class. Policy landscape. What do we have in the current PPP program? I'm sure you've heard about the ongoing movement to amend the BOT law into the PPP law or the PPP Act that we're pushing. It's been moving very fast in the House and in the Senate. The President has mentioned PPP as a priority agenda, priority legislation for the PPP Act during SONA. And we are optimistic it's going to be approved, the new PPP law, or we call it National PPP Code, before the end of the year. After which we're going to put out the implementing rules and regulations first quarter of next year. Okay, but in the meantime, what we have is the existing PPP policy framework, the BOT law and JV guidelines. Next slide, please. Sorry. Not working. Okay, no, please. Thank you. This one, as I was saying, it's a policy agenda of this administration. PPP is a major development agenda of the Build Better More program of this administration. In fact, agenda number 4, through job creation, through infrastructure improvement and others, actually capitalizes on the role of the private sector through PPP. Of course, when we look at financing of infrastructure and development requirements, we always put PPP alongside the 2 other traditional sources. As Bill mentioned during his opening remarks, we enjoin private sector finance as well as their efficiencies into this important development projects and infrastructure requirements. Next slide, please. This is a formally set out target, 7.2% of, not 2022, 2028, infrastructure spending as a percentage of our gross domestic product. Very specific target in government putting out financing through the options I mentioned, appropriations, ODA, and of course private sector finance put into infrastructure. Next slide. This is the framework I was saying. Currently, we have the BOT law, and my good friend Alagra will, I think, expound on this later. The BOT law applies for both national and local governments. JV guidelines for government corporations, SUCs, and other corporate entities of government. Local governments, as we know, can do both, can directly invoke the BOT law and its implementing rules and regulations. They can also formalize a local PPP ordinance, a local PPP code. As you know, the DILG early 2019 issued a circular encouraging local governments to formalize a local PPP ordinance or local PPP code, taking off from their legislative powers to put out a customized, specific to that LGU type of PPP options that they can undertake, and of course the projects they want to pursue as such. In both JVs and BOTs and the local PPP code, they can both have the solicited track and the unsolicited options. Solicited, as you all know, is that track where the project is put together by government, the public sector, and then solicits officially private sector partner. Unsolicited is that which private sector has put together and then submits to government, and then of course goes to a challenge process or the procurement process or the competitive challenge process. We all refer to as the challenge process. Over the years as well, we also have formalized some improvements in the way we do PPPs in the form of policy circulars. As mentioned earlier, we have a PPP governing board. It's a policy-making body composed of the secretaries, cabinet level committee of NEDA, DOF, DBM, DOJ, what else, DPI, and a private sector representative. Bill used to be that. Some of this were enacted during his time. Policy circulars to improve and supplement the BOT law, the JV guidelines. So public consultation and engagement, when should LGUs or agencies consult, at what stage of the project, things to consider, best practices. There's a lot of best practices in national and local that can be replicated. Assessing value for money, managing affected employees, viability of financing, termination payments, even mainstreaming environmental, displacement, social and gender concerns into PPPs. All of this are available and are being used as well as reference when our both national and local governments undertake PPPs. This and the BOT law, the IRR, the JV guidelines are the things we're going to put together and consolidate into the prospective or the upcoming PPP law. Next slide, please. This is what I was saying. It's a priority bill. It's on third and final reading, both in the House. It's Committee on Public Works, Congressman Salceda. At the Senate, it's the Committee on Public Works as well, Senator JV Hersito, sorry. Bicameral conference ratified it. And what are the major amendments to this one? Next slide. It will build on the broaden and expand the BOT, fold in the JV option into that as well. So we'll have a PPP law now covering different or various PPP options, BOT variants, joint ventures, and or combinations of them. We'll unify this fragmented legal framework that various agencies, given different mandates, draw from into one consolidated source of legal framework for PPPs. Principles to guide IAs is implementing agencies or the public agency in the PPP, in the identification and development of projects, prioritization process and requirements and criteria. Improvements in the approval process will be streamlining, shortening some of the process, particularly for unsolicited proposals. Clarifying rules on allowable incentives and investment recovery mechanisms, repayment structures, for example, for PPPs, variation, contract termination provisions, and of course, strengthening institutions. A lot of the concerns we saw over the years are capacity, clarity of institutional roles. Who's going to do what at the contracting, review, approvals, policy making, oversight, coordination, monitoring roles. So clarification of that institutional setup on PPPs, both at the national and local level. Next slide, please. Where are we in our continuing PPP narrative? This is a cumulative listing of project, but we have a few added to the pipeline since the start of this administration. We have actually already under implementation since the enactment of the BOT law, 181 projects in both national and local level. In the pipeline, meaning in various stages of preparation, soon going to go to approvals, review, and then eventually procurement, some under development conceptualization, some are being put together with the PPP Center, with the fund that we have, around 105 of them. And you'd notice increasing number of local governments getting into PPPs. And these are projects that have been there for years, thought of doing it through regular financing or some loans, but eventually decided, because they couldn't fund it that way, look at the PPP option. All of this, we have details of all of this on our website, but just to go through them very quickly, this is what we have. Next slide, please. Okay, some examples of these things in the pipeline. I'm sure you've seen this in the newspaper, you've read this in the newspaper and on television. Things we're looking at in the program will soon happen. There's a big UPPGH Cancer Center project of DOH and the University of the Philippines. It's a 300-bed inpatient and outpatient cancer center facility. Will be located in the PGH compound. We have secured approval for this project, and we will eventually have the bid submission date by the end of the year. One of the first project, I think, to go to the market under the current administration. I think this is one trend if we want to talk about trends in PPP. Moving on to non-traditional infrastructure projects. One big hospital project. There was one during the Aquino administration, but it did not reach award. But over the years, and also after the pandemic, we're looking at public health facilities being put together to PPPs. Private sector bringing in innovation into the design, the quarantine facility considerations, etc. Another one, long overdue, but there's a upgrading, expansion, operations, and maintenance of the NAIA airport. I'm sure you've heard there was a big interest for this one from our conglomerates here. The DOTR, PPP Center assessed DOTR and ADB as well in putting together the feasibility study. This has been approved, and we have undertaken the pre-bid conference. And so far we have, if I'm not mistaken, 5 or 6 big firms participating in this very important, long overdue airport modernization project. Next slide. This one is a dialysis center. While this is undertaken by DOH, Department of Health, this is going to benefit a local city and Baguio City, and of course the local governments nearby. This is a dialysis center for the renal care center facility at the Baguio General Hospital Medical Center. Yeah, this is going to be undertaken again as PPP. This was approved in the last what's this NED board, I think 2 weeks ago, and will soon go out to tender. Next slide. Another one is, as we mentioned, probably a good trend as well that we can talk about is the more unsolicited PPPs coming up in our frame, and this is also something that we strengthened and more clarified in terms of process in the proposed PPP law. There's one big unsolicited proposal for the upgrading, expansion, operation and maintenance of the Laguindingan Airport. You know the private partner proposing that is here. The OTR and CAAP would be the contracting entities. This is a 30-year unsolicited BOT project. We hope to have this as well going out to the market for the challenge process early next year. Next slide. There's another one, Bohol Panglao Airport, the operation and maintenance of this airport. Again, another trend maybe. We're seeing projects being undertaken through unbundled structure, meaning financing is usually or can be done through government appropriations or ODA, but operations and maintenance through private sector. So looking at private sector efficiencies into a major components such as operation and maintenance. So again, upgrading the airport with the concepts of green and connected airports, operation and maintenance, private sector efficiency inputs into this important airport in Bohol, Panglao area. Next slide. LGUs. So how about LGUs? There's a lot happening. Can you put the next slide, please? As you know, we have, I mentioned this already, and probably and Alice involved in this. We were working together on this one with the ILG. As early as 2016, we've actually encouraged or provided some reference for LGUs in customizing a locally based or a one that's customized for a local PPP code, or it's part of the PPP for the People Directive of the ILG, encouraging LGUs to put together a local PPP ordinance, customizing for them the projects that they have and the options they're going to do as PPP, BOTs, JVs, etc. Next slide. We further expanded this, and I was in Tacloban yesterday talking to regional local planners of Vision Visayas. A lot of them has already started putting together local PPP codes. We've issued one in 2019 to supplement that, particularly on joint venture arrangements. And this is a clarification of that, particularly for JV types of PPPs. Again, there's a template JV ordinance that they can use as reference. The subsequent question, of course, of LGUs, but we don't have capacity. How do we formalize a team to do PPP work? Next slide, please. So we, along with the ILG, PPP Center put together this circular formalizing, I'm going to be done in a few minutes. Yes, formalizing the creation of an economic enterprise division within the LGUs, this local economic development planning unit. And we said there has to be an economic enterprise division to do the following PPP related tasks. We were the one who particularly put together this specific functions that mimics the role of planning, programming, preparation, etc. So building that institutional capacity within the LGUs. Next slide. Okay, so what are we looking at? A lot of LGUs coming to us for help on PPPs. What are the PPP projects? We're seeing a lot of water supply and sanitation projects, some vertical infrastructure, property development, expansion of an old public market, having some commercial development around it, mini mall, mini arcade, commercial center, several of that happening. Agriculture, food security, bagsakan centers, expanded public markets, transportation, bus terminals, some ecotourism owned by local government assets, some small renewable energy projects in local government, a lot of, again, water supply, sanitation, solid waste management. This is an old number, the one here, but I've seen 2 or 3 LGUs getting into ICT-enabled office automation, municipal operations using ICT systems, and even the street lighting, having an IT system that really manages the whole thing. under one contract with the private sector. Next slide. Some examples I'd like to, can't be seen, but there's a Marulas Public Market and the Cordoba Link Expressway project. Very good examples of local PPPs undertaken. Sorry, I think something's wrong with the file, but these are operational projects undertaken by local governments. Both the Cordova Bridge, as you know, is one of the biggest one at a city government of Cebu and Cordova LGU got together, and of course, the Marulas Public Market, another JV project here in Manila. Next slide. Next, please. Another one in the pipeline can be a small LGU looking at the really specific requirements as the Bislig City Water Project. We're helping them with the district and the local government. They approach our office. We're funding the FS or PDMF. PDMF is a project development and monitoring facility, and we are almost done. We hope to issue the bid documents before the end of the year. Next slide. There's another one, the Negros Occidental governor approached us. This is a project put together by the USAID Safe Water Project. They approached us and we helped them put together the feasibility study, bidding documents. We'll also go to tender by the end of the year, hopefully as well. Next slide. Just last few slides. I'm done in 5 minutes, sorry. Initiatives, yes, you all know PPP Center is the government agency mandated to help in various areas of the work, project preparation, policy work. We can do and review PPP codes, capacity building of a curriculum that we are implementing for all types of capacity requirements for PPP. Next slide, please. This one is an example of that. Next slide. There's a fund I mentioned, the PDMF. We have expanded this to have a dedicated pool of funds for local governments. And we have incorporated also some funding from UCC RTF's Urban Climate Change Resiliency Fund to particularly support LGU or local project that would look at green and resiliency climate change elements into this project. And this can be undertaken or used to support both solicited and unsolicited projects. Next slide. A lot of materials available, and this is what I was saying. Our SUCs can also look at this as research and part of the extension service to local governments, help them put together feasibility studies, even simple concept notes that they need help on. Next slide, please. We have put together PPP knowledge hubs. All over, we don't have a PPP center in the regional office PPP center. What we did is put up knowledge hubs in all NEDA regional offices. So all of the materials, all of the things we put together, all the training programs are accessible to regional offices of NEDA. They have a direct link to us. So we get a lot of actually requests and questions from LGUs, state colleges, universities, water districts, etc. So yeah, bringing local governments at the region location, PPP knowledge, support, expertise. Next slide, please. Some things we're doing also to really improve the way we do PPP. So we put together the GPROM. This is a generic preferred risk allocation matrix. This is continually improved. We've identified the risks that public and private sector usually take on, and what can private sector do, what can government have, what can be shared, what can be insured, so that they have a guide when they actually put together projects, some template of how to identify and allocate the risks. We've also put together a template of what are good ideal PPP ordinances. Anong kailangan tingnan, anong meron dapat nandoon. So some guidelines on what are good local PPP codes. Unsolicited proposal forms. We have LGUs receiving unsolicited proposal. They don't know what to do. So we put out a set of what to look for. Really guidance to them on how to respond to an unsolicited proposal. Next slide. Also, parameter terms and conditions. Have a lot of projects that have missing contractual provisions, KPI provisions, etc. So we put together mandatory parameter terms and conditions that should all be captured in all PPP contracts, national and local government. So very good material. Guide for developing local health PPP. A lot of local governments doing health PPPs, province, city, what to look for, how to structure them, what are the viable PPP structures, financing, and all available as well. Next slide. Oh. Maybe to conclude, what are the trends? I would say here, sorry, I was about to say that. We're also partnering with ADB and DNR. We're putting together a resiliency framework. So as we are formally mainstreaming resiliency elements into PPPs, we've identified the vulnerable provinces and cities, put together what we call investment portfolios for resiliency, IPRRs, as a reference for LGUs when they do projects and for the private sector when submitting proposals. Next slide. And how this can be mainstream into the design, financing, construction, operations. So these are the provinces. This is done. This is available set of materials. And we think this is a good reference both for LGUs and, of course, private sector participating or submitting bids in these locations. Next slide. Some examples of projects supported by the Urban Climate Change Resiliency Trust Fund as well, Ormoc City, Baslig Cities, and Pablo City Septage, all with the resiliency elements as well. Next slide. I think that's the last. Okay, so in summary, what are the trends? More and more LGUs doing PPPs in the non-traditional sector. Health and sanitation, water and sanitation, more creative health facilities that has quarantine facilities and related requirements. Well, not really LGUs, but SUCs getting into PPPs. Other local units in the region getting into PPPs. Another trend I would say is mainstreaming climate change. I said it's a requirement in some of the projects, even in the bidding documents we prepare, we already have that requirements. And of course, more unsolicited proposals. Benefits, as Bill mentioned, aside from financing, bringing private sector finance, efficiency inputs, automation, technology, etc. A lot of things they can put together very quickly without the constraint of procurement and budget and submit to government. Strategies, I would say, more of recommendations, formalize a local PPP ordinance, something customized and localized to your requirements. Build a dedicated PPP team, 1 or 2 persons who understand, can help you put together, understand, write contracts, review proposals, understand finance, talk to private sector, engage private sector. Unlike RA 9184, where our first contact with the private sector is once we go to official bidding process, in PPPs, as early as preparation, we can talk to private sector, have market sounding, get a gauge or a sense of what they have in mind, so that when we put together the project, we know there will be takers because we have initial dialogue or sounding off to them as to things we have in mind. And finally, look for a lot of resources is available. Feasibility study, training, materials, PPP Center, ADB, etc. All this available, and we're very much looking forward to helping more LGUs with their bigger mandates, bigger role, higher expectation to do more of these projects. Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Ellie, for the presentation. I think what we're seeing here and what cities should take advantage of is this fresh gust of wind, I guess, behind the sails of PPP projects. And, you know, it was idle for 6 long years. And it's good to see the PPP Center so active again. And we would encourage cities to take advantage of this. I think what we'll note from Ellie's presentation is that cities still have far fewer projects. Even though they're growing, there are far fewer projects than the national government. And yet the opportunities are there. The other thing I think we see is that the PPP Center has really expanded its work. It's almost like a one-stop shop where you can get the training, the resource materials, the templates, the assessment tools, the funding for feasibility studies and monitoring, all under one office. And they've wisely extended their reach in the regions through the NEDA regional offices. So they should be quite easy to find, I think. So I would say let's take advantage, if I were a city, take advantage of these opportunities. So from the general overview of the PPP Center and how the PPP projects and the policy works, and we're happy to see the new legislation coming through. Let's focus more on some uh, sort of nuts and bolts, I guess, of the project. And here I'd like to uh, introduce our second speaker, who would be Al Agra. Al is a recognized PPP specialist and a passionate advocate of PPP law. He has contributed significantly to the field of public-private partnerships, especially at the local government level, boasting a rich portfolio of lectures, publications, and trademark programs. His template PPP ordinance has been referred to by close to 120 provinces, cities, and municipalities. Additionally, he is a professor of law at the Ateneo Law School, PLM or Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Maynila Law School, and the UP Law School, Diliman. He's been teaching local government law for 30 years and has authored publications and policy papers on local governments. And if that weren't enough, Al is also an avid athlete. He is the founding president of the Pilipinas Obstacle Sports Federation, Obstacle Sports Federation Asia Pacific, and Five Throws for All. That's a new sport I haven't heard of. At age 60, he is an active competitor in obstacle sports, throwing, and paddle. So he's going to speak naturally on navigating obstacles, enhancing frameworks, and fostering growth in the Philippines through PPPs. Let's please welcome back Attorney Al Agra.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let's embrace obstacles, even for PPP and life. So it's the title of my presentation for this afternoon would be navigating and learning from PPP policy obstacles, especially as they relate to local governments, because our host and partner would be Liveable Cities. Thank you, Bill, for inviting me. And of course, the League of Cities of the Philippines. So we are transitioning to, as mentioned by Ellie, sooner, well, maybe this year, we will have a new PPP law. And I was in Clark yesterday. I had a meeting with some, aside from Clark, SIAC officials and CDC officials, had a chance to meet with local government units. They asked me, Attorney Al, what will happen to our PPP ordinances? And the answer is, they will soon be repealed. So that's the first good news. Obstacle. Unless, of course, your PPP ordinance is not inconsistent with the PPP law. So the question now is, who will say there are inconsistencies? So that will be one of the obstacles. So we are transitioning from PPP ordinances. From what I know, there are 120 provinces, cities, and municipalities who have adopted their own PPP ordinance. And soon, we will have the PPP law. So, sorry, that's one obstacle, which we use for obstacle sports, the wave wall. So today, we have no PPP law. What we have now as a national law is the Build, Operate, Transfer law. And as mentioned by Ellie, the reason why we're going to have a PPP law because it streamlines and integrates and consolidates all the possible PPP arrangements in the country. So right now, for local governments, other than the variants under the BOT law, we have those ordinances. So tomorrow, I mean November or December, we're expecting the passage of the PPP law. I think, I'm not sure whether it has been transmitted to the office of the president for his signature, and we don't know what will happen, when will it will be signed, and when it will become effective. So for my presentation this afternoon, I will be talking about today and tomorrow. But before that, just to add on to the facts and figures mentioned by Ellie, this is my own take of what I've seen in terms of the LGU landscape for local governments. There are 120 or so, 150 maybe. They have their own PPP ordinances. I have a template PPP ordinance, which was once upon a time the template of the ILG. And in my menu of choices, there are 26 plus possible schemes, 26 plus. From what I know, in Ellie's presentation earlier, there are 60 plus 12 local projects. I know of around 50. Markets, roads, bridges, reclamation, power, transportation, power, water, information technology, socialized housing, and even health. From what I know, the favorites of local governments would be joint ventures and leases. And I think 9 out of 10, I don't have any empirical data. 9 out of 10 are unsolicited proposals, and maybe 10% are solicited. And 1 out of the 50, from what I know, there were no challengers. Okay, so 90% unsolicited, and almost 100% there were no challengers through the unsolicited proposal route. I will refrain from making judgments. So maybe that's up to all of us to do during the Q&A. Okay? So these are the 10 areas, because we're going to learn and to navigate and to calibrate PPPs with local government units under the proposed PPP code or PPP law. And these are the 10 areas that I will be discussing this afternoon. Okay? Let's talk about, again, my framework for my presentation will be about today. And tomorrow, will tomorrow change? I don't know. So about today, PPP under the template PPP ordinances, there's a clear definition. In my definition, there are 2 parts. What is the policy? And there's a definition at the project level. People ask, how come there's a 4th P? Because for me, not just to be overly dramatic, I just wanted to underscore in the title of the development strategy itself, the why of PPPs. And that should be the people. So that's public-private partnership for the people or for the public good. Embedded in the template ordinances would be general welfare, inclusive growth, sustainable and integrated development. All core values of a livable city. Sorry, I had to mention that for... And tomorrow, under the proposed PPP law, how many have read the PPP law? We don't have one yet. The soon to be signed PPP law. There's no definition of PPP. I looked at it twice. There's no definition. I'm assuming that the IRR committee will supply the definition. And for me as a lawyer, as an academic, as a teacher, definitions are very, very important. Of course. So the values in the PPP law would be public interest, better quality PPPs. No, I would have wanted it better quality of life. But of course, here, PPPs must be of better quality. And for local governments, there's a separate paragraph, local autonomy and self-reliance. Okay, so those are the stated purposes in the PPP ordinances today and what are stated in the approved BICAM version of the PPP law. And of course, the reason why we're here, so that we will appreciate the value of PPP, how can it achieve a livable city. So borrowing the slide from Bill's presentation, these are the formula, ingredients of a livable city: citizen engagement, PPP, better service delivery, efficient policymaking, and inclusive growth. And by the way, one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals is partnership for a purpose, for a goal. So PPP is one of the vehicles or instruments to achieve reduction of poverty, better quality of life, the other Sustainable Development Goals. And hopefully tomorrow, the 11th Sustainable Development Goal will be a livable city, which is actually captured in the logo of the Livable City. Okay na ba yung plug na yun? Ano, Bill? Thank you. Of course, thank you. So, let's move on. Ano to, no? Para siyang movie. Mas nagiging climactic, more drama, you know. So this is just the purposes, the why. Sorry, very important for us to appreciate the why. Okay. Policy making, okay? Today, for local governments, who sets the policies? So right now, decentralization and subsidiarity, especially for those schemes which are not found in the BOT law, local governments have the greater freedom to provide for these because there's none provided by statute. So greater decentralization, and when I say subsidiarity, local government units know better because they're in the front line. And therefore, they know better, they know their problems, they would know what would be the solutions to their problems. That's the principle of subsidiarity. And to address local concerns, they know more, they have superior competence. These are key, sorry if I'm talking about a teacher on local government law, these are very important values regarding local autonomy. So how does local government, of course, set the policy? Through local ordinances. And one important principle for local legislation would be the principle of subordinate legislation, meaning ordinances must not be inconsistent with national laws. Today, we only have one national law on PPP, and that is the BOT law. Tomorrow, there is centralization now. Local governments, superior competence have been clipped. Why? Because today we have the BOT law. Tomorrow, we will have not just BOT, but public-private partnership law. So the PPP law will trump superior competence by local government units. Local governments must follow the PPP law because it's the law. If local governments will not follow the PPP law, that will violate the principle of subordinate legislation. So for policymaking, even if they relate to local governments, the PPP governing board will set the overall policy policymaking body. It will set the strategic direction. It will come out with guidelines, forms, and templates. It will come out with the guidelines on LGU risk management fund And the PPP Governing Board will also act as the IRR committee. Who will define PPP? Now, for me, that will be my first provision. NEDA ICC will come out with the guidelines on government undertakings using national government funds. And the draft contract must be reviewed by the statutory council. I'm not aware of a statutory council for local governments, except for their legal officers. There's no OGCC, OSG, or DOJ for local governments. And the Department of Finance, if there would be any government undertaking like guarantees. So today, local governments have freedom. Of course, not absolute. Tomorrow, restricted. Okay, very important slide. PPP ordinances will be considered repealed or modified if they are inconsistent with the PPP law. Number two, if there are existing contracts, following the non-impairment of contracts, we must respect contracts. Then the law will be, you follow the law which was used when you entered into that arrangement. And the PPP law will have splitory application. Look at the last three. Okay? When there's a notice of award but no contract, if it is solicited and bidding has started, and unsolicited proposal and it has reached stage 3, which is the challenge phase, then you have the same rule. The PPP law tomorrow is now the governing law. Unless rights will be violated. Because if rights and obligations, if rights will be violated, then you follow the PPP ordinance. Question, what are those rights? I don't know at this point. Okay? So this will be the effect if and when the PPP law will become law. PPP schemes, greater freedom to legislate. In the template PPP ordinance, there are 26. BOT law is the only national law right now on PPP. And as I mentioned earlier in my menu of PPP options, there are 26. So I suppose the question is, what modalities or arrangements will be covered on tomorrow? And the answer to that would be, of course, there's limited freedom now. The proposed PPP law makes no mention of build, operate, transfer. But it is the same referring to the first bullet. FDCOM, finance, design, construct, operate, and maintain. JVs, for as long as it will not alter the mandate, it is an investment activity. And I read this twice or thrice. If government enters into a JV with the private sector, it is not exclusive. Sorry, I saw Dennis's face. LGU and the private sector can still enter into other arrangements for the same project. So why will you, sorry, trying to suppress my, so, so it's non-exclusionary. For leases, question, what type of leases will be covered under the PPP law? A lease which has rehabilitate, operate, maintain, plus working capital and improvements. And PPP is a component of FDCOM. Question for me, will straight lease be allowed? Like the UP Town Center or the public markets? Will that be, those types of arrangements, will that be covered under the new law? And when government is the lessee, will you also follow the government law or the procurement law? So these are questions. Hopefully, will be answered by the IRR committee. Next. Okay, LGU projects. Under the BOT law, they must be normally financed, undertaken by government. Under the PPP ordinance, it doesn't have to be normally financed. It can be, for as long as it's proprietary, not governmental. However, under in the PPP law, the project must be typically provided by the public sector. In short, if it's not typically provided by the public sector, you don't follow this PPP law. Or it's not a PPP. And local governments must submit their lists to the regional development councils and to the PPP center. By the way, one of the major changes under the proposed law, PPP center will have great powers and responsibilities, greater than what it possesses today. Approvals. This is interesting. BOT law, you have these thresholds, 20 million, 50 million, and 200 million. But for JVs and leases, because there's none provided for by law, there's no NEDA, there's no PPP center, strictly speaking, it's not a requirement, and there's no local development councils. What will happen tomorrow? By the way, I'll give you my website later on. You can download this presentation for free, no? So you don't have to take pictures unless you want to take picture with me. No? So. Sorry, how do I back? Yes, okay. Tomorrow, projects by local governments must be confirmed by local development councils. And by the way, under the proposed law, if the local development councils will not act on your endorsement, it's deemed approved on the 30th day. PPP Center will determine whether the proposal is complete or incomplete, whether national or local project. Government undertakings using national government funds must be approved by NEDA. Projects affecting national sectoral plans must be endorsed by national government. And for interlocal government unit, you have three options. It becomes a national project, or let's say 2 municipalities, it becomes a provincial project. Or third, the 2 local governments will undertake it, but they must get their respective approvals. The 15 billion threshold applies to national government projects. Unsolicited proposals, the more popular route. Today, completeness check is by the local government unit. BOT law, as we all know, does not allow priority projects to be pursued via unsolicited proposal unless there is new technology. If there's a multiple proposal, you apply the first in time approach. But for PPP ordinance, it's the most advantageous. And you become the original proponent, or you obtain original proponent status upon acceptance of the proposal, and it is right to match. Naka-ready na si Dennis. If there's a challenger, of course. And that's 1% of today. Okay? What happens tomorrow? Completeness check by the PPP Center, even for local projects, because the law does not make a distinction. Priority projects are now allowed for unsolicited proposals. LGU acceptance through inaction. Inaction for 90 days, deemed accepted. But you're not yet the original proponent, because under the PPP law, proposed PPP law, you only become the original proponent after successful negotiations. Multiple proposals, it's now not first in time approach, but the most advantageous. And right to match. Wala nang best and final offer, or right to outbid, or opportunity to submit a better financial offer. So none of those. Now it's streamlined, right to match. Okay. Devolution, Mandana's ruling. Under the 1991 Local Government Code, local governments only had a share in internal revenue taxes. devolution then was incomplete. And for PPPs, government can contribute cash and not cash. Under the Mandanas ruling promulgated in 2018, it's now internal and external, rightfully so, because the Constitution says national taxes. Full devolution, but we're still grappling with that. And third, because of the windfall, although local governments say it's still not enough, government can contribute more. Successor risk. Under the template PPP ordinances, there are 4 ways by which successor risk is mitigated. Meaning, because we've heard horror stories that the incumbent mayor unilaterally cancels the contract entered into by the previous mayor. Yes, okay, sick, okay. Hopefully, under the PPP ordinance, that could be protected by the following. No unilateral rescission. Number 2, annotation in the title. Number 3, subject the project award through a plebiscite. And rights must not be prejudiced. So under the PPP law, tomorrow, we have MAGA now. There's a definition now, MAGA, material adverse government action, which is a contingent liability which can be covered by the LGU Risk Management Fund. Could you avail of the National Risk Management Fund? Only if the local government contributes. So this is the only way by which successor risk could be protected under the proposed PPP law. We're winding down. Regulation. Today, we have a PPP regulatory authority. Let's say for the Cordova Bridge, which was mentioned by Ellie earlier, you have a PPP regulatory authority which handles contract management, tariff setting, and subsidy administration. Tomorrow, what will happen for regulation? Project implementation per contract, and LGU will supervise, monitor, and control, and the local government through an ordinance can set up a local rate setting body. Contract amendments. Today, for as long as both parties agree and the right to amend is in the contract, and this right to amend is given to all challengers and to all bidders, then you can amend the contract. What does the proposed law say about amendments? Any variation, expansion, and extension of the term, changes in schedule, tolls, decrease in LGU revenues, change in project scope, contract extension, and increase in government financial liabilities. Okay? This must be approved by the approving body per recommendation of the local government unit. In sum, have you heard of this term, advertunities? Creating opportunities from adversities. Okay. In fact, one of my tattoos says adversity, advertunity. Okay, I'm a firm believer that obstacles, we embrace obstacles, and we can create opportunities out of them. So this is my summary slide. We have no choice but to follow the PPP law. LGUs, we have to follow this when this becomes a law. Number 2, for me, PPPs should promote local autonomy and fiscal autonomy. Even if PPP law only talks about typically public sector projects, all local governments are challenged to come out with innovative and responsive projects. Have you heard of the centralist view of local autonomy and liberal view of local autonomy? Centralist view, local government can only exercise the power given to them. In short, cut and paste. I do not subscribe to that. I subscribe to the liberal view. For as long as there's no prohibition, and for as long as it will serve the general welfare, it should be allowed. So that's a liberal view. LGU capability building, hands full for PPP Center and for the leagues. Inter-LGU PPP, I'm an advocate of this. Future-proofing of local government projects to withstand successor risk. And first quarter of next year, according to Ellie, will be another policy milestone. So everyone, I think, should submit their proposals to the IRR committee for the implementing rules and regulation of PPP. So if you want to download a copy of my presentation, just visit my website. You can download it for free. Salamat and magandang hapon sa ating lahat.
Thank you. Thank you, Al. Thank you, Al. Really eye-opening. I can see everybody taking pictures of the slides, and really paying close attention. So I guess you can say we're really right in the middle of a shift, okay? And it's going to be, it looks to me like a very significant shift when the PPP law is introduced. So thanks, Al, for that presentation. So for the first two presentations, we took a look at the general principles behind PPP, the status of the projects, what's been completed, what's been in the pipeline, what's national, what's local. And then Al walked us through the obstacles and the opportunities, if that's the right word, Al, that lie ahead of us. And so now let us switch. Having seen that picture, let's take a look at the picture of how to finance the projects. And so we move to our third speaker, Ida Johnson. Ida is also a repeat speaker here at Liveable Cities Labs. She started as a, shall we say, traditional banker, and then she moved into investment banking and handling of special purpose vehicles. She is really sought after speaker, not only here in the country, but across the region on this particular topic of finance for projects. She sits as an independent director on a number of 3 publicly listed corporations. So you can see that Ida is really in demand. And she runs her own investment banking firm, Opal Investments. So just to round it out, because I like to put a little factoid per speaker, just to make things interesting. For those of you who don't know Ida, or who don't follow her on Facebook, Ida is also a terrific hip-hop dancer, okay? And that will maybe illustrate how multi-talented Ida is. Because how many of you know an investment banker who is a hip-hop dancer? Okay? But she really is an expert in her field on finance, and it's my pleasure to welcome our third speaker, Ida Johnson. Ida?
The reason I'm coming up here, and I didn't get this from breakdancing right away, I slipped, is because I cannot use my left hand as much, so I'm gonna be up here. But ordinarily, I would have actually been walking around. Okay, so thank you, Bill. Keeping that a secret on the breakdancing thing, on the hip hop. I don't breakdance, but I used to. I used to win when I was 16, breakdancing. Okay, so let's take it back on that one. Iba-block na kita, Bill. Okay, so thank you, Liveable Cities. I'm so happy to be here again. Thank you, Mr. Bill, Misha, and the rest of the committee of Liveable Cities. Thank you, Globe, for this. Last time we had this, it was a bit of a rush, and I was thinking on a point of view of a lender, land bank DBP, which is basically an ERA-based repayment source. But this time around, I'm gonna make it into a what's important to the mayor. So I'm going to expand that a little bit. Okay. So first is thank you, Attorney Agra, as usual. That's enlightening. Thank you, Ellie. In fact, the fact that your proposals are going to pass the PPP is giving us a level of comfort. When I say we as lenders, creditors, potential investors, that it has passed through and it's kind of like a more professional feasibility, in the lack of a better word. Okay, so the hat that I'm wearing is the hat that what is good for you, cities, and how to improve your funding proposals. Okay. Sorry. Go back to okay. 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 So as we know, lots of projects happening. It's kind of all over the news. Every second day you will hear about different projects, especially now. Sorry about that. We have seen about the relationship between the PPP and also the Maharlika Fund, because the fund of Maharlika can even be a funder or investor to the PPP projects. And at the same time, this is very new, this is only October 18, where the IFC also practically congratulated the PPP Center into having that framework done. Okay, so having said that, lots of projects from the infrastructure. It's not moving. Oh, okay. That's supposed to be a video. Anyway, lots of projects from the infrastructure, different infrastructures. Could be water, it could be transportation, it could be green, it could be tourism. So lots of projects that can be funded, most especially when there's a Mandanas law that can already be implemented. You will find the cities will have a little bit more elbow room in terms of projects that they want to do because they would have funding source direct from their own cities. So as a topic that I'm going to touch on, what type of funding you can go for. It's not just a typical loan funding, but different funding sources, where to get this funding or financing, and how to improve your chances in getting financing. Okay, so typically when it comes to a PPP project, you will have the local government, the government go into a special purpose vehicle company where it's the special purpose vehicle company that would actually fund the project. And this is to keep an arm's length and to have an own P&L on that particular project. So that's, I think from discussions with Ellie, that's actually normally the case. I will not explain the whole situation here, but I'm just going to touch on the financing part of it, given that I have only like 10 minutes to explain. So typically when it comes to funding, I'm going to go this side because I got to click this side and I can only use this hand, that side. Okay, typically when it comes to financing, you can go borrowings, that's typical part of it. You can try to get equity financing. You can get debt financing also from fintechs. The others it could be a private sector that would fund the project, put all the equity in, for argument's sake, which is quite rare. You can have bilateral institutions, you can have ADB, you can have IFC helping out in the project and even give some financing to the project. You can have other bilaterals, such as if you're getting, for argument's sake, the equipment from Russia, through the embassy of Russia, you can get financing from them, long-term financing, supplier's credit. If you're getting it from the typical ones are the Germany, Japan, Europe, you can actually get financing from there for the project so that you have lessened your financing cost. Others would be by way of grants and supports, could be in the future, the Maharlika Fund, as mentioned. But I will concentrate in the absence of time, basically the basic ones that are being used in terms of funding. So typically, if you want to approach a funder, you can get a private investor in. You can get one or two. It's called the targeted or preemptive solicitation. You can go through and issue some bonds to actually raise the funding for that. And You can also get it from listing. Believe it or not, which is not being availed, there's actually available listing, public listing with the SEC, but not being availed. Now, that's a difference between public listing because you need 3 years profitability versus a new project going into listing. There's a special rule on that one. Or you can go to a fintech, a crowdfunding platform. If the project is 50 million and below, that could be done by, for argument's sake, Sit-in Technologies Inc. I happen to sit in that board, so that can be funded by that too. Little bit stringent compared to the banks. You can go into online lending. Again, a little bit stringent when it comes to the banks, but both, unfortunately, are a little bit more expensive when it comes to interest rates. Or you can, this is not yet out. Hopefully by the end of the year, the SEC will release a digital asset offering. It's another crowdfunding platform where the Tom, Dick, and Harry's can actually put money in, and you will own shares in the company, the SPV, and that could be a source. So watch out, that could help you as well. I want to concentrate now in terms of how to improve your chances in getting financing. Okay, so typically, and again, lender's point of view, we look at 5 Cs of credit, the character, capacity, condition, collateral, and capital. So just, again, I'm going to breeze through this. The number one point that's being looked at by lender, if the cities would want to borrow or the joint venture would want to borrow, is really the people behind the business. So if you have a mayor, I would say like Mayor Magalong or Abi Binay, you'd have a high chance of getting that approved because of the character behind the business. And if you're partnering with Globe, for argument's sake, on that venture, you'd probably have a very, very high chance, two varies, very, very high chance because of the character behind the business. So that's actually number one thing that's being looked at, followed by the cash flow. And this is where the PPP centers can help you, because that's where you would want to have a certain project, know what would be the repayment source. For argument's sake, if it's a market and you would rent the stalls, then you would have a cash flow to that. So the first year, you'd probably have 30% of the market to be filled in, and then eventually 50, 60, and therefore you would have an increasing repayment. That repayment source is very, very critical because that's what the lenders and, by the way, investors are actually looking into in a lot of details. Let me repeat though, in the present market, because of the couple of years pandemic, it's a little bit unfortunate that the banks, the creditors are stringent when it comes to giving loans at the moment. So it has to be a really, really good deal for them to actually release some funding. May I also make a mention that statistically, only 30% of project financing are successful. Now, from my interview with Mr. Ellie, how many PPPs are actually successful? He said practically all. See, the difference between the typical project financing to a PPP where you have the LGUs involved is the LGUs, they have different funding source. They have different repayment source, which is, of course, either the IRA or now eventually the Mandanas. So, and that's why I would assume that I actually sat as a senior vice president in the Philippine National Bank. I headed the loans, and we had zero past due when it comes to LGU projects because of the IRA. But now, we now need to look more into the project as the main repayment source. So going down the requirement, of course, the market condition, which is part of the feasibility studies mentioned by Mr. Ellie, what's the demands of the market? What's the demands in terms of your area? What is needed? That's why if the government, the local government is not aware of it, they would like unsolicited proposals because you would know what the city requires. And therefore, there would be demand of that project. Equity invested in the project goes without saying. There's a rule of thumb. We call it 70-30. At the very minimum, 20-80, 20% equity, 80% to be financed, or 30% equity, 70% to be financed. That's typically what the banks are looking at. And finally, collateral into the project. And normally what can be collateralized is the actual project itself. So that's the part as far as lending is concerned. You may be wondering, okay, well, we don't really want to borrow. We want to lure investors in so that we don't have to borrow. So what should be inside your feasibility study? And this is typically what we investors would normally look into. Of course, the executive summary would cover the C, the character behind the business and so on. The description of the SPV, where you're going into, what is expected of that, the city, the background of the city, the projects that's been successful, and vice versa, your partner, the success of that in doing projects. Organizational structure of the SPV, or whoever is the entity that you would want to lure the investors in. And of course, the project in itself and why you believe that the project is needed and there would be demand. It boils down to demand. If there's a demand for it, then you're practically home run. Market analysis and sales strategies, again, it's similar to the market condition. How do you intend to market? You know, sometimes you think you just build a project there, but the marketing part is not being done. So people are not even aware that, for argument's sake, if it's a digital project, that digital project can actually help improve the LGUs. So that marketing part should be part and parcel, and financing should be part and parcel of that. You should have a level of percentage to be budgeted even for marketing. The actual investment proposals, other financing options that you're looking into, whatever operational plan, the strategies that if it's a build, operate, transfer, who will really operate, level of comfort, of course, of investors, that the ones that are operating should be expert in the business. So we're looking at a minimum of 3 years of business, the expertise behind it, the successful projects of your partner, more so than the local government, because there's really more of the ones proposing the project, but it's really the partner's integrity when it comes to the operational. So we would look at the operational plan, who's in charge, who's your CEO, and how the flow of work is going. Perhaps I talk too fast because I think I'm nearing the end of my slide. And of course, the legal structure in terms of the arrangement, but given that there's already a PPP structure on the requirements and the enhancement being mentioned by Attorney Agra. So perhaps that's something that can already be imputed rather than guessing. But if you have the thing is about the PPP projects compared to a typical project financing, the level of comfort is you have experts in the business as well as the government. So you have two eyes looking into the project. Okay, a typical structure when it comes to a joint venture, when it comes to PPPs, when it comes to M&As is really this, where one proponent is looking at whatever strategy is going to be acquired, going up to the requirement of the local government unit, if you're going to go into that project, searching for who you want to partner with, going up to the planning and whatever evaluation. Again, this is all part and parcel of the feasibility study. And eventually negotiation with the local government when you're ready with your project, moving up to completion of the due diligence, the documentation, the financing, and eventually shaking hands and implementation. I am open to questions later on under the panel because it's really quite extensive when it comes to when it comes to all of the different types of financing. This would take at least an hour each to actually explain what a more complex projects, you don't limit yourself with one financing options. You can have a private equity investor as well as financing. You can have a crowdfunding private, and then at the same time, debt financing as well. So the combination of that, what is actually different from today's market in your financing option is you can have fintechs. You can have, as I mentioned earlier on, you can have the crowdfunding. You can look at that as other options if you want something quicker. You can even look at that for working capital requirements if your project is needing that working capital. Online lending, they are available. If you don't know who they are, go to Fintech Alliance. We have 27 lenders there, and that's gone through excessive checkings that they are above board and following legal structures. Or you can wait out also for the digital asset offering. It's similar to a stock offering. This should be out by SEC end of the year. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ida. And yeah, I think you can see there are many combinations for sourcing the funds for your project, no? For LGUs. And I think just listening to Ida, it's like we almost need to create a several weeks of courses, detailed courses to run through all, how to tap into these various options and to see the pros and cons and how they fit into your particular project, because there's so many types of projects that LGUs will have. So thanks, Ida, for that. I think right now we're going to go into we'll take a short break as we set up the stage for the open forum, and then we're going to invite all our panelists plus Dennis Javier up on stage and start thinking of your questions because we'll be able to pass a mic around and you can ask your questions, and we'll also take questions on the Zoom and the Facebook platforms as well. So let's give us a few minutes to set up the stage and invite our panelists and speakers up on stage. Thank you.
May we invite all our speakers to join Bill Luz on stage, please. Director Eli Ricote, Attorney Al Agra, and Ms. Ida Tiongson. May I also call on Dennis Javier, Business Development Director for e-Government and PPP Champion of Globe. To our on-site attendees, if you have any questions, you may raise your hand and be recognized, and an usher will bring a mic over to you. For those participating on Zoom or Facebook Live, you may use the Q&A box or comment section to submit your questions. There will be a designated point person available on Zoom and Facebook to submit your questions.
Okay, let's is this working? Can you hear me clearly? All right, let's start with the questions. And those of you grabbing food can, of course, bring your food to your seats, and and we can have the open forum and all at the same time. So, okay, let's open up the floor for questions, and we can take questions from here on site, live at Globe Tower. So if there are any questions, just raise your hand. We'll run a microphone over to you. And I see the first question. Let me ask you, okay, microphone, please. Microphone over here. May I ask you to introduce yourself and who you'd like to whom you'd like to address your question?
Maybe to the panel. My name is Alex Timbol. In the 1990s, I worked for a company called All Asia Capital. If you're not familiar with that, we were original proponent of MRT3. So I'm actually very familiar with the deal. It's actually unique. MRT3 is unique because it's the only build, lease, and transfer PPP. And hopefully it will not happen again. Okay. Um, to give you an idea, the traditional model is you build, operate, and transfer. You build it, you operate it, you collect the revenues, you pay yourself. At the end of the lease term, the project is turned over. Under the build, lease, transfer, it looks very good on paper. You build it, you put together the financing package, you hope the government pays the lease. Okay, but you let the government operate it. What happened with MRT3 was that first President Estrada reduced the fares. The original planned fare was 17 to 35, but he said, oh, that's too high. Let's reduce it to 11 to 17. But then that means that government now has to allot from the GAA a subsidy. And that subsidy came to around 2 billion and was growing every year by about 10%. And then until the 2005 fiscal crisis, which you remember is a time of day when President GMA had to increase the VAT and expand it to 12%. And then that means that the bondholders weren't being paid. And so I was actually contacted by the parties involved to work together on a deal. And that deal resulted in Land Bank and DBP buying the bonds eventually. But so I just wanted to share that experience. And because I've spoken to some of the newer PPP proponents who are thinking of doing a BLT again with LGU PPPs. And I said, that doesn't seem like a good idea. So I just like to know your thoughts on this.
Okay, thanks for the question. And who would like to take a crack at that question? Good idea, bad idea, BLT?
Actually, that case was subject to arbitration in Singapore. So actually, it was not at that time clear what law was applicable. The dispute was whether the civil code is applicable or the BOT law, BLT. So we have other BLT arrangements, the classrooms. So that was the second arrangement. Right now, under the proposed PPP law, there's no mention of BLT, but it's a arrangement that will be captured under the PPP law, under the FDCOM with lease. So it's not, when we talk about arrangement, it's not a one size fits all. Depends on the project, depends on the appetite of the private sector. JV might be appropriate for one, but lease might be appropriate for another. So that's part of the study that is required before whether you solicit or you unsolicit, whether you go through unsolicited proposal. So this is my take on that matter.
Quick point about that. Yes, I know the story about the MRT3. It's a not very good example of a. But as you saw from the projects I raised, we've evolved in looking at rail, PPP, and this even unbundling, private sector only doing operational maintenance, and all of this different permutations, taking on from the lessons as well, previous projects.
Thank you.
I wanted to chime in on that one. Because of change of circumstance, one of them is being the tax component of it. So it kind of changes. It changed the repayment source and therefore made it a losing proposition, so to speak. It happens not just in whether it's a BLT project. It practically happens in other projects. What can perhaps be improved? The fact that we've learned from that problematic case is something that if we're going to go in the future to another BLT project, that a little bit more critical in terms of the change of circumstance situation. May I expand this a little bit, exactly what I'm referring to in terms of the equity, the bonds versus the equity in. If you have more equity in the projects and the bondholders are a little bit more comfort in having some sort of return versus more financing given to the bonds or being extended by bondholders. And in that regard, perhaps because it's a BLT project and of higher risk, perhaps a 50-50 rather than a 80-20 composition can be looked into. I wouldn't say that it's a bad idea because it's something that could be good in certain projects, but certainly there are things that can be looked into. So yeah, we learn from the, lack of a better word, mistakes of the past. And yeah, the obstacles, yeah.
Thank you for inviting us to join this webinar. So with regard to that, my only opinion would be more of it happens. And future proofing, I think, is the most important thing when you come up with your own feasibility study. So when we look at projects, we look at the term and situations that may occur, change of administration, change of policies and everything has to be considered in terms of risk mitigation.
Dennis, while I have you holding the mic here, first of all, just to introduce Dennis properly, Dennis is in charge of eGov here in Globe, and he's, I guess, the champion for the LGU projects, right? So, Dennis, let me ask you, you didn't get a chance to present, but we wanted you here to be on the panel. And, you know, what can government do to make it easier to attract, you know, private companies like a Globe, for instance, to invest in partnerships with LGUs? What would attract you in? And maybe let me add, what types of projects would you, you know, find the most attractive to get into?
Thank you, Bill. First, I'd like to thank, good to see you again, Aida, Attorney Al, and Ellie. No? And from the government's perspective, how can it attract private sector to invest or to look into? Maybe one of the things that one particular LGU did was they held an investor summit. So they lined up all of their opportunities for investments and invited the private sector to attend this conference. So I think a regular session with the local government would help the private sector understand which opportunity they can come in, which are the priority projects of the LGU, and so on and so forth.
And what would you find the most attractive for you to get involved in with the cities and municipalities?
Well, Globe has, as a telco, of course, that would be the priority, more on telco services. But over the years, Globe has evolved already from a telco to a techco company. So by acquiring or partnering with a lot of companies or technology firms under the Globe Group umbrella. So it makes us more flexible in terms of providing solutions with our infrastructure and innovations to approach the different, what should I say, pillars of the LGU in terms of social concerns, health, education, transportation. It can be, we can tailor fit a solution specific to the needs. So,
thanks. I have a question here for, I guess it's good for Al and for Ellie, you know. Is it possible that and Ida actually, I think, from a financing point of view, no, is it possible that a standard or criteria for project vetting and a scorecard on projects, can that be established and maintained, not for the PPP today, but for the PPP tomorrow? Okay, so I know the sand is shifting, but yeah, how do you create that scorecard to vet projects?
Before we actually put together what we call multi-criteria analysis, it's some form of a formula that LGUs, after identifying projects, doing initial numbers on it, will use that metric and saying, is this PPable, given some metrics, financial, technical, economic, contractual, etc. That we can expand, I would say, to include new requirements, the new PPP law, the resiliency component we have to put in as well, and new innovations that we can probably put in there that can be harnessed from private sector, connectivity, ICT systems, etc. Yes, we can do that. And I would say it should be customized as well, depending on the realities of the region, the realities of a city or municipality, for example.
Thanks. Then maybe I'll direct my next question to Al. You talked about the shift from the you prefer the liberal view versus the centralist view. And there's a question here coming in on our Zoom. Were there abuses or have there been abuses committed in PPP projects at the local level that are documented that induced the national government to opt for a centralist approach? Was there a reason behind that?
For me, it's an issue of trust. How far or what's the extent of our trust relationship with not just local governments but for all stakeholders. So I think that's very important. If you and I encourage everyone to read the PPP law, there are accountability mechanisms now embedded in the law, which was not in the BOT law. So that's one of the, for me, hallmark enhancements under the PPP law, accountability, corruption, so governance, and of course, we have this PPP law. The next challenge would be enforcement of this law. But before that, of course, a lot will be waiting for the implementing rules and regulation, specifying details which will not be inconsistent with the law. Regarding the liberal view, that's really my advocacy. For as long as it is not prohibited, for as long as it will serve the general welfare, why limit? Why stymie? But that's my point of view.
Okay, thanks. Ida, you talked about sort of the criteria behind, what lenders go through, thinking through a project, starting with character. And there's two sides to the PPP. Of course, you would know the private sector side and the character there. But aside from the character of the local government, I think one challenge is the tenure of the local government. How big an impact does it have in a funder's assessment or thinking in a project?
Okay. May I answer that and then go to the credit score as well?
Okay.
Okay, so for that particular one, typically what we looked at is the protection, the legal protection. And this is where, in terms of continuity of the mayor, but I have not, as a senior banker, wearing my previous hat, we didn't have really a lot of projects, a lot of defaults questioning the projects of the previous mayor if your documentation is airtight. So then the character, as I mentioned there, would be more inclined to be checked into the partner that is proposing, whoever will do the project. Okay, as for the credit score, because I'm excited to actually answer that one. On investors' point of view, considering that these projects are of public interest, we would have a level of comfort if you have a proper strategy. I'm wearing my governance hat here. And when you have a proper strategy, of course, you're going to have your vision, the mission, the usual. You're going to have objectives and initiatives. And with your initiatives, you got to score it. You got to learn, you got to have that as well. It'll give us a better level of comfort. For argument's sake, financials, FCIL, by the way, are the typical objectives. Financials, customers, internal processes and learning. Under the financials, what are expected and what should be improved in order for you to be able to reach that particular percentage of repayment or income. So those are part of the score, and certainly the institution or the SPV that is doing this should be looking at it holistic, as if you are really just running practically like a publicly listed company where you have to have a full strategies and objectives and initiatives. So yeah, so back to the credit score, that's I would say critical. but I know it's not necessary under the presentation that you've shown, but it's something that for us as an investor or a lender, it's giving us a level of comfort that this particular SPP or institution or a PPP project is heading the right direction in line with their vision.
Thanks, Ida. Any questions? Yes, please go ahead. I have a question here from the floor. Kindly introduce yourselves, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Oscar Barenco from the United Nations Office for Project Services. And thank you for the presentations. My question is this: seeing the picture of today and tomorrow, there's going to be a lot of changes in the process. But this goes also go to you, Ellie, because it has to do with the PPP law. So this is changing. So we have seen from the United Nations that there's problems with project preparation, period. There's no bankable projects, not for public funding, for ODAs, for loans, for private sector. So the problem seems to be a capacity gap at the local government units. Now we're changing the law. So this means another change for them to absorb. So my question is, from the perspective of the panel, what will be the process to cope with so much change in so little time added to the devolution process? So this is also adding to the local government units, and this is shorter term of in office for governors and mayors. So from the panel perspective, what would be the way of coping with so much change on the coming years to be able to accelerate that gap in lack of bankable projects and to be able to accelerate that process? PPP Center is doing an amazing job in capacity building, but it's 82 provinces, 140 plus cities. So it's a big country that you have here, beautiful country in the Philippines, but the challenges are many. So my question is, what will be that key process to cope with the change and accelerate that process in order to reach that 7.2% of GDP investment on infrastructure, and also targeting social projects, which is also part of the problems that we're seeing. And thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. Ellie, I think this one is designed for you.
Thank you, Oscar. Yes, I would say it's continued policymaking refinements. We're going to have a BOT law, a PPP law. Some IRR will be needed first quarter of next year. Aside from that, I think we'll have to put out sector-specific guidelines. For example, the PPP framework, the risk sharing, what can and cannot be done as PPP, the scoping and what private sector can put in and what limitations should be there for health, for solid waste, different things. And they should be customized into specific sector guidelines or frameworks. Other countries have done PPPs, have such specific sector frameworks that would reinforce national PPP law. And for local governments, it can be area specific as well. And I think the EO 1 through 8, which is the implementing guidelines in a way of the Bananas ruling, actually said local governments has to put into their local development plans a listing of projects and have to beef up their planning, programming, and the agents in the region, NEDA, DOF, has to help them look at PPP not just as a project, but continuous policy development as well from their end, policy process refinements, along with capacity building of people and staff and team. And I would say reaching out to the private sector throughout all this process, because as we revise, revisit, expand, private sector will have inputs not just as bidder, but actually contributor to policy and process refinements, sectors and other development in the a lot easier said than done, of course, but it will mean probably having PPP as a real specific program that we formalize, not just something an administration can consider what I'm saying, but something concretized as a development agenda, as a policy agenda by both national and local governments. And of course, with the help of agencies like yours, UN, ADB, providing all the inputs, best practice from all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that brings up a good point. No, we're in a big moment of transition.
We call it the renaissance of PPP.
Yeah, well, that's true. Like, definitely. Well, the good news is, of course, that PPP is back on the radar screen after a prolonged absence. And I think there's a lot of sort of catch up that needs to be done. So going back to the today versus tomorrow framework that Al has, what happens, say, with a LGU that does not have a local ordinance? I mean, should they wait until the law comes out? Because anyway, they've either got to be consistent or it's repealed, right? And when that happens, Ellie, will your team come in and help? Will it be necessary even to write up local ordinances?
Were there two views? One view is no need for a local ordinance because the local ordinance that we have today, which will soon be repealed, actually cover the gaps. Because right now we only have one national law, the BOT law, and we have PPP ordinances to talk about the other 15 or so modalities. But now we will have one law soon that will cover all of these. So one point of view is there's no need for a local ordinance because you have the PPP law already. But the other challenge for those of us who would want to think outside the box, maybe local governments can come out with their own local ordinances that will not be covered under the PPP law. That will be another challenge, another learning challenge. So come out with a PPP law that will not be inconsistent with PPP ordinance, that will not be inconsistent with the PPP law. For example, projects that are not typically provided for by the public sector, because that's the coverage now of the PPP law. Maybe local governments can come out with their own ordinances for alternative, non-traditionally delivered projects by local governments. Or maybe there are other modalities which are not covered under the PPP law, so maybe we can think about those. So for me, as an academic, is a straight lease arrangement covered under the PPP law. And of course, there would be two views regarding that. That might be addressed by the IRR, but some might not agree if ever that's covered. So there could be future challenges even to the IRR and even the PPP law. So again, exciting future. By the way, it's not really today versus tomorrow. It's not really versus, but transition to tomorrow to the future. Yeah.
I have a question here, and let me just acknowledge first of all. I mean, we have some cities, presumably on Zoom and Facebook, but we have at least one city that's here on site at Globe Tower at the Liveable Cities Lab. Let me just acknowledge them, and they might have a question actually. This would be Victorias, the city of Victorias. They're back here from Negros Occidental. So thank you and welcome. And next time we'll also have Mayor Javi answer questions about. I think you have local PPPs, right? In Victorias. Okay.
It's going to be the housing project of the vertical housing, so we needed that. Actually, sir, I have a question, if it is okay.
Yes,
Can
go
I
ahead,
continue with just
go
one
ahead,
question
please.
for
Yes.
LGUs,
Yeah.
actually? So Victoria City is one LGU in Negros Occidental. It's a component city, actually, under a very dynamic leader, Mayor Javi Benitez. So the thing that what happened was when we were drafting the PPP ordinance, we were having problems on how to properly draft it for our LGU, because we found out that mostly of our neighbors don't have PPP ordinance as well. So it's like the PPP ordinance is new to cities or component cities like us in the province. So actually, I would just like to ask if there will be chances also, because there are a lot of cities, neighboring cities and inter-island cities and municipalities who are asking if we're already finished with our PPP, because they want to, as what attorney said, cut and paste our ordinance for that. So I would just like to ask her if it is possible that there will be like trainings or seminars for PPP formulation for LGUs like us, who are very far from Manila and needs to travel going here to just to attend this very enlightening symposium.
Yes, there is. In fact, there's a course on how to write PPP codes. We deliver it online. You can write to us. We can do it and send the staff and help you write it. That's through our write shop. Yes.
Okay, no, that's a great question, and I'm sure there are many other LGUs who need the help. Okay, one of our partners is the League of Cities of the Philippines, and at the risk of giving them more work, because I know they're extremely busy, but Soleil is here, and maybe this is something that we can coordinate with between the panelists, actually, not just Ellie, so he doesn't have to do all the heavy lifting, but maybe working with the League of Cities, Liveable Cities, our panelists and other speakers, Globe, to convene more of the cities. Maybe we could do it by grouping, regional grouping.
Regional grouping, yes, sir.
And then, of course, maybe sectoral as well, no?
Yeah.
And organize it. But I think that's a great idea. And then we just make sure it's consistent with the new PPP law.
Yep.
I think that's
We've actually done that before with Sila Veron. That's all. Yes. We
Okay.
can do that again, of course. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. I saw a question up here.
I-
Sorry,
I'm
I'll
sure-
go ahead and then we
Yeah.
get the question.
I'm sure PPP Center will have a series of seminars about the PPP law. Yours truly will. I also plan to do my own seminar about the PPP law. So just waiting for the new law to be passed before we launch. Before I suppose PPP Center also will be launching its own series of lectures about the new paradigm.
Yeah, this is really the purpose behind the Liveable Cities Labs, which is to bring a group of people together in a panel to brief an audience and to pique your interest so that you know who to call should you need more in-depth sessions, and to work together with us and the panelists and League of Cities to collaborate so that we can kind of spread the word. That's really our mission behind this project, to improve urban planning, urban management, using a range of tools. So yeah, we'd be happy to do that. Let's move here in front here to the question. Yes, please.
My name is Cesar Tolentino. I'm a research associate with Optel Incorporated, with Mr. Felbaum. I don't have a question. I have a reaction to the presentations that were made. It is a reaction to the presentation by Attorney Agra. So in a way, Attorney Agra can comment on my reaction afterwards, but any member of the panel can comment. I have a reaction to a statement in the presentation made by Attorney Agra, wherein in one of the slides, there's a statement describing the current situation, and the statement says, the LGU has superior expertise.
Competence.
Competence. My reaction is, I think it would be an improvement to suggest. My suggestion is possibly it can be improved, can be better if it is reframed as a different policy statement that says LGU has superiority in determining the prioritization of projects, rather than simply saying superior competence. Because in the same presentation, in other presentations, there were many citations that said there have been weaknesses that have been observed in the past regarding the involvement, the leadership, and the participation of LGUs in PPP projects. But perhaps by reframing it that way, policy can be improved, and hoping with that improved policy statement can be incorporated in the future for any PPP regulation. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. By the way, that term, I did not coin that. It was coined by the Supreme Court. Every time the Supreme Court resolves conflicts between national and local, they have said that when resolving conflicts in favor of local, it's a local concern. Therefore, local governments know best or know better. So that's the superior competence doctrine. It's a borrowed term. It's a legal term. The only way that local governments will not know better for local concern if there's a law which says otherwise. Now we have soon the PPP law. So that's the reason why I said the PPP law will take over that superior competence doctrine, because now we have a PPP law that will follow. But because right now we only have the BOT law, and the BOT law is just a PPP law. It is not the PPP law at the moment. So I totally appreciate that for projects. But again, the principle is local concerns, local governments. National concern, national government, unless a law says otherwise.
Thank you. So it's basically it's a legal construct, actually.
It's a legal
right?
construct.
It's a legal
Yes,
construct. Okay, question? Yes, please.
Yes, hi. My name is Tim Vargas from Mobility Vision Plus. A question is for Attorney Al and Director Ellie. I recall from the presentation of Attorney Al, crafting of the IRR. Two questions. One is for Attorney Al, like how can us from the academe and also as a public citizen, how can we be involved in the IRR? And then for Executive Director Al, also another question is, who are the involved group in the government? Like, is it, I think DOJ, NEDA, they're also part of crafting. So yeah, I mean, we want to learn as a public and as a private company also. How can we be?
Once the law is enacted, at sa dulo ng law, there's always creation of an IRR committee. And for the BOT law, the IRR committee is DOF, NEDA, DBM, the usual agents who have stake or have inputs into the policy and decision-making process on PPPs. There's a portion of that work where we'll engage private sector consultation, dialogue. We will publish it in the website where you can comment and submit. Private sector will be asked to submit comments, chambers of commerce. So yes, you can directly write to us and provide your inputs to that. So yes.
In fact, in the past, for the BOT law and the NEDA JV guidelines, there were write shops and workshops conducted by government together with the PPP Center. So we can submit our inputs there.
During the pandemic, online. Okay. Question here. Yeah, Patrick?
Sir, I have a question. I'm Patrick from Liveable Cities. Based on the presentation, it seems like more responsibility and functions are passed on to PPP Center, maybe related to the comment or question of the UN gentleman earlier. How is PPP gearing up for this additional functions as more is expected to you on reviewing all these LGU projects to review? And also in relation to that, from the panelists or based on this setup, how is RDCs and LDCs be made effective, or is it pivotal in this exercise? I saw it in Attorney Al's presentation. Some of the LDCs or RDCs may not be as active, and so how do we? Because that's also the way where private sector can come in.
Thank you. Very good point. We're both excited and scared, but generally, I think more involvement of the PPP is really to allow us to be able to provide our interventions as much as we can, reach out to more as much as we can in the preparation, review, approval, implementation, all of these aspects. How are we gearing up for that? We've submitted to DBM our request for more positions, a bigger budget. Hopefully, we're looking at other. Because we have the previous PPP center was actually enabled by a big technical assistance from ADB. We're talking to the development partners for help as well. And we are building up our presence in the region, not by putting up an office, by coordinating with the NEDA regional office. The NEDA regional office, by the way, airs the Regional Development Council, Governor So all of the local projects of the LGUs, UCs, water districts goes to the RDC. So I in fact said to the regional directors to have regional RDC meeting an agenda on PPP matters so that all LGUs, SUCs who have PPP project in various stages, there's a portion where they can raise concern, question, ask for help, and then we can go and sit down and we beef up the PPP knowledge corner we put up in the regional offices. So that one. And the other thing I was saying is we can partner with SUCs. SUs are state universities and colleges all over the country. They MBA, MPA, says faculty who are experts in public policy, feasibility study, project finance. We can top them. They can be harnessed as go-to institution of the LPs in the region. They can invite out to go there and them and we can expand the expertise locally. And to be fair, and I'm even glad a lot of LGUs now come to us, approach us, ask for help, which is I would say, but we need to catch up in terms of resources, capacity, reach, and yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Elia. You're gonna have your work cut out for you. But I was gonna ask you about the role of SUCs, and I think you just answered it. That you can tap into the faculty and the different schools, I guess.
Even research build. I realized there is very little PPP literature about local cases, local public policy in the Philippines written by local authors. So UP actually approached us and said, Eli, can we put up a special course on PPP in UP and Sepag, and Ateneo Alice initiated some work there. But we need to have more local written work by local authors on PPP cases, best practices, policy, etc. To, as a reference in building up the PPP story in the Philippines and in the region.
That's a good idea.
And SUCs can also enter into PPPs. So that's another opportunity for our state universities and colleges.
Okay, meaning the SUC itself has a project, is the partner. Is
Yes.
one
Yes.
is one half the partnership.
And under the PPP law, they're classified as local PPPs. So when you talk about local PPPs, these are local governments and state universities and colleges. So the one we discussed earlier also covers them.
Okay, that's new. I didn't know that. Yeah, please have a question here. Then I'm going to have a question for Ida.
In case of a dispute, I'm sorry, I'm Susan Amoroso of the Maritime Journalists Association of the Philippines, and I'm also into property development. Well, my question is, who rules when it comes to disputes between the private entities and the government? And what do you mean when you say that the PPP, when it comes into, when it's enacted into law, will be supreme in that activity?
First, on the dispute resolution, there's I think, an order mandating all PPP contracts of built-in provisions on dispute resolution mechanisms that both parties will agree. So built into the contract po yung mechanism for dispute resolution and settlement. So yes, Al can supplement on this. I understand we also put together a governing board circular and dispute management. Yes, and the new IRR of the new PPP law will have that in more detail.
Yeah, under the PPP law again, there's a alternative dispute resolution will now be incorporated about. Local governments must follow the PPP law when it becomes law. No choice. Under the principle of subordinate legislation, local ordinances must not be inconsistent with national laws. PPP law this year.
Thanks. Ida. Ida, I have a question for you. You mentioned, so you had many options for financing. And you mentioned some organizations like the FinTech alliance, no? So is there a formalized sort of mechanism or structure by which, and have you ever been approached by, say, a group of cities? Or can the League of Cities approach you and say, let's have a joint session with FinTech Alliance for the purpose of listening to what's available out there for pitching projects? And if not, is there, does that sound like a good idea?
Thank you for that question. FinTech Alliance is actually huge. One portion of it is the P2P lending, or should I say crowdfunding. The crowdfunding, there are three in the Philippines. There are Investry, SID-IN, sorry, I just forgot the other one. We've been going around the country together with SEC, with the LGUs, by the way, and telling them about this facility. And happy to say that a lot of their citizens have in fact availed, but I have yet to see an LGU availing that, which actually they can. So there are other fintech platforms that the online lending and eventually when the digital asset is actually out that can help. And actually it's a great idea to have a session perhaps with the LGUs to know that it's not just, as far as lending or investment is concerned, it's not just the banks that can do it for you, but there are other institutions such as fintechs that can also help.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think it would be a good idea to have sort of a periodic session with the mayors and the project proponents who may not be aware that actually this is an option available to them. And if that's the case, I guess the partner becomes the crowdfunding company, I suppose. The platform becomes the partner in the project. So that'll be a great idea. Time for one last question.
Bill, while we're waiting for that last question, the gentleman earlier on was asking about the IRR. It would be good if he's part of an association like FinTech Alliance or MAP or whatever, PCCI, because if you actually put your inputs, it has a greater weight when it's an institution, association.
We actually wrote the PCCI, MAP, asking for inputs, and they gathered from the various members. Yeah, that would be a good idea. Before waiting for that one question, as Al mentioned, some of the inputs of the new people will really be governance, improving process, providing penalties, making sure they submit, and we get to monitor their work. One other important point there is the role of COA, Commission on Audit, and this is something has been a challenge in most LGUs, particularly COA's role in auditing local PPPs. What we did is to put in there as well some mechanism for what's the jurisdiction of COA and PPPs. We went to COA. COA agreed with us to put together a PPP audit guide, a separate, independent, customized guide in auditing COA and auditing PPPs, distinct from the usual government-funded projects. So there's that.
Yeah, thank you. There was one question that came in, but it was already mentioned by Ellie in his recommendations now, which is LGUs have a low confidence or maybe a lack of enough knowledge to get involved in PPP projects. So you mentioned something good, which is you recommended that maybe they create, technical working groups and dedicated teams of experts that can deal directly with you. Can you walk us through a little bit how that can be done? And then when they get that done, how do they regularly maintain contact with the PPP Center?
Yeah, as I said, we helped the ILG put together a memorandum circular on the creation of local investment economic planning office. And under that office, we suggested and put in the circular as well, a dedicated economic enterprise division where they have this project preparation, review, approvals, monitoring role. The challenge, however, is capacity. They don't have plenty of position, they have resources, and they can short-term or cut terms with the mayor. We have been suggesting that they be selected from the more permanent guys. And we reach out to them and we said, can you send us the names of this designated PPP person? We can train them. We have a curriculum, for them. So that we have also been asking our nether regional office counterparts to reach out to them And then we again put out the training program for them. The other thing is some of them rely on consultants and experts. We say let's have more permanent people, not coterminous with the mayor. Real, and we normally suggest as well the planning legal person in that LGU who can transition and own the project and move it through different regimes. Yeah.
Let me ask a last question. With respect to projects which are more social service oriented, where the cash flow is either
not there,
it's like non-existent, or very erratic, or it's just never even considered. Ellie, in your experience, I mean, are there LGUs coming to you or proponents come to you with, PPPs for something like disaster resilience or stuff like that? And so how can those proceed? I mean, it's so difficult to measure a cash flow out of a disaster resilience project.
Well, depending on the context and the project, there are many ways to, and this is part of our lecture actually. We can do bundling. We can some of the non-revenue generating component bundle with revenue generating one, a commercial development attached to a non-revenue generating element. For example, water, there's real need there, and revenue streams along bundle with the sanitation, like a non-revenue generating or a small modest a slaughterhouse, bundle it with the big public market and the property developed. Things like that. It's like that.
Well, that's a practical approach. We had one more question here.
Yes, hi, I'm
Or two more
Erica.
questions. Okay, go ahead. 1, 2.
I'm Erica, sustainability consultant. So, just a complimentary question on superior competence. Because in the formulation of the PPP law, were there or what were the measures taken to ensure that the interests of the public sector and the private sector in the project implementation are like balanced or both taken into consideration? And also, Attorney Agra mentioned earlier, like in his presentation, that usually they would, like LGUs would have a favorite PPP scheme. So, because like from that, like the project initiatives seem to be like very bottom up, but like maybe we can be more guided by the master plan on like what should be focused on or like given priority, like in terms of like rather than having like a favorite PPP. I don't know. Maybe you can elaborate more on that. Thank you.
Well, the favorites for today are JVs and long-term leases. But I don't know, because of the PPP law, if there will be a favorite, because all these arrangements will now be governed by the same law, which is the PPP law. And the reason why JVs and leases are favorites today, because they're not covered by any national law. So LGUs have the freedom to pursue JVs and leases. What was the first question? By the way, the PPP journey does not end with the signing of the contract. It is more challenging after implementation. Imagine a contract for 50 years, for 30 years. A lot of things can happen or not happen during that period. There could be variations, successor risk, protesters risk. These are the top two risks in the Philippines. So rate setting is another challenge. If people feel that local governments are not capable in terms of entering into PPP contracts, the other challenge would be the regulation duties of local governments. So we have to do a lot of learning, unlearning, and relearning, especially with the advent of this new law. But PPP Center is up to the challenge.
The vote of confidence there.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Got a question?
Maybe last question.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yes, I'm Attorney Zenia Barion from Filipinas Drabo. You made mention earlier, Director Ellie, that for LGUs, you have a capacity building arm to train and
capacitate them with regard to PPP. However, when we looked upon the website, it's more of for the implementing agencies. So to be able to expand the base and the participants for the PPP, are there any plans or programs for the private sector to be able to capacitate them as well? And also, when we attended the Philippine Urban Forum, I think this month, there was a software that was being promoted for climate change risk assessment. But when we asked whether the same program would be available for the private sector to be able to be able to give more information for unsolicited proposal to meet these risks, they said that it was only available to the LGUs. So the setback, or at least the challenge for the private sector to be able to meet the needs of the public sector is that this information, as well as the training, is not that available for the private sector. And if available, who are the competent persons or parties that would be able to give these instructions or guidelines on the part of the private sector?
Well, sadly, our mandate is for government. So when we say training, capacity building, technical assistance to our clients, IAs, implementing agency, it means to national, local, all of the public sector entities. This is a recurring question. I've been asking DTI, because DTI has a business development side, and alam ko sa existing BOT law, the promotions and marketing and help private sector, inviting private sector, care of DTI, and probably even training and business matching. So to be honest, it's not the mandate of the PPP Center to train private sector, but we have in our own small way reached out to private sector and did some knowledge sharing, training programs, etc. But our main clients, public agencies.
Can I chime in on that
Yeah,
one?
go ahead.
In case not aware, Institute of Corporate Directors, we actually do strategy sessions, and specifically for what private sector and ISA is doing for the public sector, where we go to you, another hat I'm wearing because it's governance, we go to you and sit down for about 2 to 3 days, set up your vision, mission, and whatever strategies and the path that you want to go into. And yeah, so that's a major capacity building, and that could help you in terms of sustainability because it covers a whole range of areas.
Yeah, so that's Institute for Corporate Directors, ICD. Okay, there's now more questions, I'm sure, in our minds, but we're running out of time as well. I just want to, first of all, thank our panelists today for coming back. Ellie Ricotta from PPP Center, Al Agra, Ida Chongson from Opal Investments and FinTech Alliance and ICD and many other groups. And Dennis, of course, from Globe. And Dennis, we hope to see more of you in the PPP projects, actually. I think good opportunities there, and the cities are gonna need it, right? I wanna thank the audience also for all your very active participation and questions. And now I'd like to turn over to our long-term, I thank the panel, and maybe we can step down, and I'd like to invite Soleil Manzano to come and deliver the closing remarks on behalf of the League of Cities, our longtime partner. Soleil?
So thank you, Sir Bill, and good afternoon to our everyone, to our panelists, to again to Sir Bill, Attorney Agra, Director Ellie, Ms. Ida, Sir Dennis, Sir Manny, and our city mayors dialed in, and LGU representatives on site and online, especially to our colleagues from Victoria City. So good afternoon. So on behalf of LCP National President and Cebu City Mayor Mike Rama and all other city mayors of the League of Cities of the Philippines, I would like to commend the Liveable Cities Philippines and Globe Telecom for another successful Liveable Cities Lab. I would also like to thank our very able panelists for sharing their experiences in the profound impact of PPP in fostering growth and addressing urgent concerns in local government. So today, cities are faced with some of the most difficult and urgent challenges in urban development. While the revenue share of local government units in national taxes has increased last year and in the coming years, we understand that this may not be enough to finance the basic services and functions fully devolved to cities. So now more than ever, a whole-of-nation approach is necessary to execute essential projects, sustain these initiatives, and create more livable cities in the Philippines. So our panelists and moderator this afternoon have done an amazing job in illustrating why PPPs are beneficial to local governments. With additional financial support, innovative practices, and access to specialized knowledge, it is no wonder we'd find these partnerships so appealing. So instead, allow me to highlight how cities can better avail this opportunity. An enabling environment must be created to encourage more private investments. So transparent fiscal environment and a clear regulatory system are only among the facilitating factors that make cities more investable. I hope the Liveable Cities team can also help us look into this as we further navigate PPP's role as a catalyst for more sustainable urban development and achieving the sustainable development goals. So the League continues to be grateful to work alongside the Liveable Cities Philippines and Globe in creating a platform to share solutions to complex problems, strengthen existing partnerships, and forging new ones, of course, all to ensure that cities are well equipped in their pursuit of more resilient and safe urban communities. We are all partners in developing and implementing a whole of society approach in addressing some of the most difficult and urgent challenges in urban development. We are called upon to play our vital part in finding shared solutions to take on this challenge together. So once again, congratulations to the organizers for their work in arranging this event and to everyone who has contributed to making this Liveable Cities Lab a resounding success. So I hope to see you all again in the next Liveable Cities Lab. Thank you.
Thank you, Soleil, and thank you so much again for joining us today. We invite you to our last lab for the year, looking at intelligent cities on December 5 at the Asian Institute of Management. So we hope to see you again there. Before all our on-site and online participants leave, we ask you to answer the event evaluation form. You may scan the QR code on screen to access it, and after answering, you will receive your certificate of attendance. Your feedback will also help us improve our Liveable Cities Lab series. And now may we ask our speakers to join us in front for our photo op.